The serpent has a long and checkered past throughout our history. Originally, it was worshipped for its healing properties and ability to shed its skin, and then later demonized by Christianity along with its followers. Nonetheless, evidence has been unearthed all over the world suggesting serpents were a big part of most cultures at one time or another. Looking deeper into Ophiolatreia, or serpent worship, patterns begin to emerge which suggest that the serpent, or naga, or dragon, was once revered and worshipped across the globe, and may even have laid the foundations for most, if not all, religions today. Leading Ophiolatreia expert, author and lecturer Phil Gardner helps us to shed even more light on serpent worship. With claims that the serpent can be found at the root of most religions, it must have been around a long time. So, just how old is serpent worship?
The age of serpent worship is a moot point, probably a very difficult one. Well, it certainly was a few years ago. Today, we now have a new understanding because a couple of years ago, a doctor from Oslo University was investigating this very same thing, and she was doing some research in Botswana, and she actually found the oldest place of ritual on the planet, and it's 70,000 years old, and it's a serpent cave. At the front of this cave is a great big massive head of python, and there are all kinds of images of the snake there. So she's proved beyond all doubt that it's as old as 70,000 years. Most of the other evidence that we had prior to that can place it, at least 5,000 years before Christ, where we look at China, we look at Japan, we look at the Far East, the Middle East, especially in places like Babylonian texts. We can certainly place it, way back. Some of the contention was, before that, was things like in Australia, where we know that it was basically split off around about 50,000 years ago from the rest of the world. And yet they maintained worship of the serpent with things like the rainbow serpent, which most people will know, and you can certainly find on the internet. But apart from that, it then gets really complex at a certain point. Around about 1,000 years before Christ, it starts to, all over the world, it starts to get really intense, and so we get lots of texts, basically writing that come around, and we get hieroglyphs, we get pictoglyphs, we get all those kind of things. So we start to get intense ideas of the serpent worship all over the world, and this is the amazing thing about it. It's not necessarily the age, which is fantastic, and all along I've been predicting that we will find something which will show that this originated in Africa, and she did. It was fantastic evidence. But we're actually finding that it's all over the world. This is incredible stuff. This blows away religions that right now we have 1 billion Catholics on the planet, all following a religion which originated in one little place. And yet serpent worship, which it stamped out all over the world, was all over the world. It had been spread in Neolithic times, in prehistoric times, it had spread everywhere. So, I'm really pleased that it was found 70,000 years ago in Africa. It's actually confirmation of everything that us people who are in Ophiolatreia, which is the study of serpent worship, were pointing out. It came from Africa. And we pointed that out because we could see that it had spread into Mesopotamia, and that it had gone into Egypt, and that it had crossed the Middle East and gone into, Judaism even. Some of the earliest images of Yahweh are as a serpent. There are Roman coins with Yahweh on as a serpent. So, it spread there, it spread across Europe, it went north into the Norse mythology where we get the dragons, because a dragon is a serpent, it's a winged serpent. It spread across into China, it went to Africa. And producing a map of this, coming from Africa to Australia, across to the Far East, it shows the spread all over the world. South America, it's there, it's North America, it's everywhere.
So, with serpent worship dating back to 70,000 years ago, it would appear to predate most current religions. However, evidence needs to be found worldwide for it to be a credible predecessor. So where exactly has the serpent spread to?
Other places where the worship of the serpent has been found, quite apart from the rest of the world obviously, India. India is a huge place for it, and it's a great place for it too because it's still around today. You can still go to India and you can still see the serpents paraded through the streets regularly. The great serpent deities there were known as the Naga, which is a word for serpent or specifically cobra. So you will see a multi-headed cobra quite a lot. You know, anybody who's seen Indiana Jones, I think it's Temple of Doom, you'll see a lot of that kind of thing there. India is absolutely full of it, and it goes back an awful long way. A lot of people think that's down to a thing known as the Kundalini, which is supposed energy that is coiled at the spine. The Kundalini is the little serpent that's coiled 3.5 times at the base of the spine, and you're supposed to raise it up your spine through certain power points known as chakras, which all resonate at different frequencies, and you're supposed to open them up until you get to the 7th, where you suddenly become enlightened. The actual evidence for that is very thin. Chakras are old, yes, but chakras were all kinds of different things, not necessarily just the human body. They were all over the place, in buildings and all kinds of things. But the serpent's always associated with it. So the serpent there is associated with the frequency and waveform yet again, and certainly enlightenment. But that's not the be-all and end-all of serpent worship. It's one of those reasons. In India too, the serpent is used, or has been used for healing. Parts of the body have been used, the venom has been used. And the same is true when we go further east towards China. We get China, Taiwan, all the Far East, Japan. You've got the serpent there as the dragon form. And what you find all over the world is that it's dualistic. It's not just the one serpent. There are many different kinds, but normally what you get is probably a female serpent, but a feminine lunar type serpent, with the lunar goddess, but also a fiery aspect female serpent too. So you'll get this double-headed thing, and you can point that out maybe in Greece, where you get Athene, where there are images of her with Medusa on her breastplate or on her robe. So you've got the Medusa there. Medusa is a Gorgon sister. The hair was turned to serpents, and basically when the head was chopped off from Medusa, 2 strands of blood came out, one that would kill you and one that would cure you. All of this, of course, is symbolic. It never actually happened, and it's symbolic of the fact that Athene and Medusa were actually one female goddess with the 2 divine aspects. The bad, I'll kill you, and the good, I'll save you. And it's the same with the male aspects of the serpent. You find 2 faces to the serpent. So, you know, it's difficult to say really general that's everywhere, but it is one of those general things that you do find, you do come across, almost regardless of period, but that kind of got wiped away much later on. So you've got India, you've got Scandinavia, in Europe it's there again. We've obviously got the Druids, but further south we find the same thing in France and Italy. And there's a really cool thing still happening today in Italy. If you think that kind of thing is cool, but it's good if you're interested in Ophiolatreia. You can still see the anthropology today. There's a festival of San Domenico, where the saint is paraded through the streets, draped in serpents, because San Domenico basically replaced the original serpent deity, which was paraded through the streets. Now he's covered in serpents. And one of the great things about the fact that Christianity did stamp itself all over the world and replace names at wells and rivers and different places is the fact that they actually didn't destroy it. They kept it alive for us. They just changed the names. So with like San Domenico, where we've still got the rituals still happening there, we know that was where serpent worship was. St. Patrick in Ireland, where there aren't no snakes, but we know serpent worship was. And that is repeated everywhere. St. Paul, he does the same thing when he goes to Malta. He arrives in Malta, he's bitten by a snake, cures himself, kicks off all the serpents. Malta was a place of serpent worship, without all doubt. Cyprus, originally known as the island of serpents. Same goes for many islands in Greece. So we know that serpent worship was there too, before it was overturned by later Christianity. So So there you've got the Mediterranean, we've got the Far East, we've got North America, South America, Scandinavia, Africa. There's nowhere left to turn. The snake is everywhere, all over the planet, and it's very ancient, and it was there well before all the religions that we have today, but still can be found in the religions we have today. Even in Islam, there are traditions and folk tales and texts from early on of Muhammad not being able to be cured for a certain illness that he had, and then allowing the serpent worshippers to heal him with the beneficial healing elements of the snake. We have traditions and folk tales that it wasn't Gabriel who came down and helped Mary have a child, it was actually the serpent. This is a Gnostic tradition. It's a Gnostic tradition that Mary, when she was only 18 months old, was joined by the serpent, and the result was Jesus. The Immaculate Conception was actually a serpent in the first place, according to the early Gnostics. These same Gnostics who of course worship the serpent. One group of those Gnostics were also known as the Nicene, and this is where you get Nazareth, because there's no way that Jesus came from Nazareth. It's just, most biblical scholars will scoff at that these days. It's actually from the Nicene, and it's a serpent worshipping word. It means the serpent. It's no different to Nehushtan, the word used for the brazen serpent in the wilderness of Moses. So it's all over the world. It's all throughout time, and it's in all religions. It doesn't matter which way you turn. It's in all the old religions that are still left to us today, whether it be Hinduism, which is just covered in, as it would be, even Islam and Christianity. It's there.
Serpent worship appears to have covered most of the globe and has transcended cultures in one form or another. So, why would man hold serpents in such high esteem above other animals?
One of the things that's always been said to me is, well, why isn't the cow maybe, or the goat, or the sheep, or whatever other animal, why isn't that down as being worshipped? We know in Egypt, for instance, that there are many animal deities, if you like, or certainly linked with the human form. What makes the difference is this: the serpent's everywhere, the goat and the cow aren't. We don't find the goat worshipped in certain places, but we do find the serpent there. And what do we mean by serpent worship in the first place? We mean something that is revered by man, that is looked towards as being something very, very special and higher than themselves. And the image of the serpent was that. It's a multi-layered thing, and there are many, many reasons for the worship of the serpent, which I'm sure we'll get into. So you have to decide on which place it is and what period you're talking about as to why they worship that serpent in that place. For instance, you can look towards certain parts of Africa today. In anthropology, we can find that there are still tribes today that are worshipping the serpent, and they're doing so because the serpent actually gives them healing benefits. They pin the serpent to the tribal hut, and they will go and take parts of the snake and use bits of skin to rejuvenate their own skin, and all those kinds of things. So it's worshipped as a very holy thing that is given to them by nature, the greater God, if you like. It's one of those things that's given to them in that way. But there are a great many reasons as to why it's worshipped all over the world.
The ubiquitous and worldwide use of serpent imagery suggests that it was far more respected than other animals, such as the goat or the cow, and the healing power that could be derived from the snake's flesh or venom is also something that would be naturally admired by man. But there is no evidence to suggest one all-powerful serpent religion, and for serpents to succeed, they needed to be revered by many different cultures in many different ways. So what evidence is there of this?
There are a great many reasons for worshipping the serpent. Most of them are argued over intently by a lot of people, because people will pick on one thing and that'll become their cross. That'll be the one thing that they believe in. Now, I'm a firm believer, not in many things, but certainly in this, that you have to be open to all the answers. Now, when you go through Ophiolatreia and you read Dean and Bathurst and all these other different people, you find that there are many answers because there are a great many different cultures all over the world. And there are a great many elements to the snake. Firstly, most people will point out that the serpent, the snake itself, will actually annually go off, slough its skin off, and reappear, reborn. That's an incredible thing in itself, you know. So that is a symbol that man saw in nature, and any wise man from the past will have been a man that observed nature. You know, people like Paracelsus himself, who used serpent symbology in a great many ways, said that, you know, the real Bible is nature. That's the thing we should read. So they would observe the snake going off, sloughing its skin, and being reborn from a cave or from a small dark place. I mean, anybody who knows the story of Jesus can see an analogy there. And I do think that actually the story of Jesus, and the many layers of the story of Jesus, are based upon original serpent worship. The sloughing of the skin or shroud, leaving the shroud behind in the tomb, the coming out reborn, the being the solar divinity. The snakes were often seen and often used as solar divinities. In fact, the word snake comes from sun ek, which is the sun and the serpent. It's the power and fire of the sun. So snake itself, the word comes from the sun. So Jesus is coming out of this tomb, you know, he's being resurrected like the snake, leaving his shroud behind him, and he is the sun. There is the fact that most religion is based upon experience, and that experience is something that is also debated and argued over an awful lot. Some call it the mystical experience, some call it you know, drug-induced hypnosis, or all kinds of different things. But the fact remains that that experience occurs to man, and has occurred to him for a long, long time. And he will do a great many things to get into that experience. He will meditate, he will pray, he will do dervish, dance, spin around. He will separate himself and go off into a cave. He will fast, or he will take drugs. And whilst doing so, he enters this altered state of consciousness where he goes and sees a different plane of existence, or so it is believed, and that has become the other world of man. But whilst in that state, there are archetypes that all men see. And one of those that Watson and Crick will tell you about, the people who discovered DNA when they did their LSD trip, they will tell you that they saw the serpent form. They see the spiral, and they see waves. A lot of researchers will point this out. It's not just me, that Jeremy Narby, all kinds of different researchers into serpent worship point out that when we go into an altered state of consciousness, one of the most powerful archetypes that we see in there is that serpent form. Some believe it's man getting back and seeing DNA itself, the very structure of our life. I am actually more inclined to believe that it's the waveform that they're seeing, it's energy itself, the thing that gives life. The very thing from the Big Bang, everything has a waveform, whether it be a rock or the sea itself, everything has a waveform. And I actually think that ancient man comprehended that in intuitive ways, the intuitive being the altered states of consciousness. And you know, there is some evidence for that. When you go around a lot of Neolithic sites, you will see the waveforms, spirals, you see all kinds of strange squiggly shapes, which I believe, and a lot of other people believe, a lot of that comes from this altered state of consciousness, this experience that the old shaman was having. So that's another explanation for the worship of the serpent. It's something seen in this otherworldly experience, something that you see when you view heaven, you know, this place of the gods. You don't see a goat, you don't see a cow, you see serpents. Many other reasons, but one of the big ones that I'm really interested in is the fact that the serpent, from a healing point of view, is incredibly important. For an awful long time now, we can find materia medica, pieces of paper, alchemy, all kinds of different evidence to show that different elements of the snake were used to heal different parts of the body, and the whole body too. As I've said before, in Africa people would take the skin and it would help revitalise your own skin. So if you get a cut, you could revitalise yourself. The gall or the venom of the snake is by dry weight, it's 90% protein. It is a very, very powerful packet. there is a lot of evidence to show that alchemists were using little white powdered or pills that were white, and they would use terms which related to the serpent for those little pills, and they would be rejuvenated and their hair would change back to the original colour and all kinds of different things. Now, there's many other elements to the snake that people have used in China and Taiwan and in places in the Far East. Actual meat of the snake is infused in alcohol, and it becomes a snake drink. Other elements to it, well, modern science is actually taking a look, and has been now for a few years, at the venom of the snake in particular, and is finding that the proteins, enzymes, polypeptides within that venom itself, once broken down, they're finding a lot of beneficial results, and certain drugs have already been made. One of them, unfortunately, was banned in America because it hadn't been tested properly, but the effects that it was having on 6,000 people that tested it were incredible. It was curing all kinds of different things. So there's a lot of research going off into venom, and the work that I did for one of my books, I pointed to the fact that it appears from the history that man, in the ancient past, actually understood that the venom was very useful. The problem is, it can damage the body. So they mixed it with something, and I had the kind of idea that maybe they mixed it with the actual blood of the snake. Now that might sound strange, but when you look at alchemy, you find that you must mix the red and the white. You find all kinds of stories of the red and the white dragon, and red and white is always important, two things that you must mix. And I kind of had this idea, well, the blood and the venom must be mixed. The proportions, I'm not going to go and shout about because I don't want people to try it, but the proportions are there in ancient texts. And it's not stupid, because when you think about it, the snake actually produces this poison. It injects the animal. It doesn't want to kill the animal, it wants to keep it alive. It just wants it to die slowly. It wants to be fresh, basically. But it's a very poisonous thing. Well, he's going to go and eat that beast, that little rat or whatever it is. So he's going to ingest poison. Well, there are things within his own blood which actually fight that venom. So if you take that blood and you mix it with that venom, you're actually counteracting, but still keeping the beneficial proteins, enzymes and polypeptides that there are in that venom. And I'm not the only person to suggest this. There are a great many scientists around the world that are working very hard on this at the moment, and there is some breakthroughs appearing right now. So it's really good stuff. It's being found great for all kinds of things. It's not necessarily there as a cure for things, although it does cure things. It's there to boost the immune system so that you don't catch things, so that you don't develop disease. It boosts the immune system, and that's what proteins are good for, boosting the immune system. One of the things which makes us die is that there's a kind of a cap on the chromosome, and that cap kind of depletes and we end up dying. If you can find some kind of way of keeping that cap alive and healthy, then you can extend life, and they've tried this with certain flies and things, and it's proven you can just keep that fly alive forever. The only way the fly dies is it bashes its wing and it can't fly anymore. So they've proven that, well, this venom, or certain kinds of venom, actually has answers to this to help that cap stay alive. So this is very interesting, and which is why I say I think it was actually an origin to the elixir of life, which is why the alchemists themselves use serpent symbols copiously everywhere you look. So that's fascinating. So that's another big reason. It's not just the venom, it's the meat, it's the bile even. The bile is ingested. So great physical reasons, subtle psychological reasons in the altered state of consciousness, concepts of seeing the waveform, and also visual. The snake goes off, sloughs its skin off and comes back alive. Now, just on the venom point and that sloughing skin off and coming back out alive, Jesus was crucified on a cross. It was equated to the brazen serpent of Moses. Now, Moses, when he was in the wilderness, all the people were being bitten by snakes, and he cried out to God and said, what am I going to do? My people are dying. And God says to Moses, raise up a brazen serpent in the wilderness and tell the people to look at it. And they were cured of their snake bites. Now when Jesus is raised up in the wilderness on a cross is equated to the brazen serpent, and some of the earliest images of Jesus are actually having as a snake on a cross. And there's an awful lot of alchemical images of the snake pinned to a cross. Very similar things done today in Africa and South America, where venomous snakes are pinned to a tree and used to save. So that's still occurring, but in that fact, when Jesus was on that cross, he was fed two things. One of those was vinegar, okay, which is like a wine. The other thing is called gall. Now gall, the word used in the Bible, is snake venom. Jesus on the cross was fed a mixture of gall, snake venom and wine. This is the early Eucharist. And now this really does come out in rituals later on. So if we ever wonder, was the serpent worshipped? The early Christians did worship the serpent. And I'm not the first person to say this. Early Christian writers said this too. It's not me. The evidence comes from Eusebius and people like that who are telling us these things. The early Christians, known as the Gnostics, which were many bands, but one of them particularly was known as the Ophites. Now, that means serpent worshipper. They worshipped the serpent. And their Eucharist was to have the blood, the wine, and the bread, but they would let loose the serpent, and the serpent would kiss the bread and drink the wine to consecrate that blood and body of the Lord, which they called the Good Serpent. Jesus was actually called at the very earliest of times the Good Serpent, because he was placed up, held up, and it says in the Bible, he shall be held up as the brazen serpent in the wilderness. Earliest times, the Saviour is equated to the serpent. And it's not just Jesus. It's all the other saviour deities from where Christianity basically created their myth of the Christian God anyway. You know, so if you want to look at deities from before Christ, such as Buddha, there are huge serpent stories about Buddha. Buddha subdued the fiery serpent. Buddha had the chalice with wound up serpents inside it. You know, he brought healing with it. It's even claimed that he is the son of a serpent. Zoroaster, another great solar deity, died on a cross, did all the things that Jesus did too, was said to be the son of a serpent. There are huge serpent mythologies associated with Zoroaster, whichever Zoroaster it was, because there are many of them. So, you know, all the deities, Dionysus, all of them, Bacchus, they're all involved or all come from original serpent worship, and all the same things are there. You know, the healing, the resurrection, you know, all the things, the things that me and my Father are one, etc., etc., are all related to the old serpent worship. So, you know, you've got serpent worship is still alive today, but it's in our new religions, who simply replaced the actual picture of a snake with a man.
Many religions have roots that mention the serpent, and there are some striking similarities between the feats of deities and the serpent itself, such as the sloughing of its skin. But are these just coincidences? And why can't we find more evidence that the serpent existed today?
Why is it so difficult to find evidence of serpent worship? It isn't. It just isn't. You've just not opened your eyes to it, basically. It's like when you're going to go and buy a car, you may pick a particular kind of car. Suddenly, when you're driving along, you see them everywhere. Your perceptions are opened up to them, that's all. You know, I often say to my son, when we're walking along through the woods, can you hear the birds? Oh, I can now. What can you smell? You know, and what can you see? What's on your left? What's on your right? Suddenly, I'm opening up all the perceptions for this guy, and the world's a bigger place. The fact is, once your eyes are open to serpent worship, you'll find it everywhere. You'll be going into churches and you'll be seeing chalices with snakes going up them or coming out, and this will be St. Paul's chalice. This is the famous cup that he drank from that didn't poison him, which had snake poison in it apparently. Or, you know, there are many traditions around that. You'll see the brazen serpent of Moses in the stained glass window. You'll see snakes everywhere in churches. I guarantee it. Go out there and look into churches. You only have to type into the internet names like John Bathurst Dean and Staniland Wake, These are Victorian guys who actually did some really serious work on Ophiolatreia. Just type Serpent Worship in and you'll find them. And the books are freely available on the internet. You can download them now in public domain. Some fantastic work in there which really does open your eyes. It can be hard going, and try to read it with some new information, special information that we now have, that Serpent Worship has been placed back to 70,000 years ago. You can find it everywhere. It's all over the place. I recently had a trip in Norway where we went to look at some of the work of a guy called Harald Borker, and he'd written a book called The Viking Serpent. Well, anybody who knows about Viking ships, the Vikings will know that there's a dragon at the head of the ship. Well, this isn't unknown. This isn't just Viking ships. This is many ships. You know, ships that were seen to be coming into South America a long, long time ago were said to have been on boats of serpents, and that quotes of collateral will come back on boats with serpents' heads, etc., etc. You go to China, got boats with serpents. Still today. So we went to Norway, and there you can see these great, you know, Viking ships with their dragon heads. But more than that, you can find things called stave churches, and these are beautiful churches, absolutely gorgeous, with these great dragon heads coming from the, you know, from the top and from all different directions, and wonderful designs going up and down. Snakes everywhere. A lot of these churches have been destroyed by Christians, but now today they're worshipped by Christians. Don't realise that they're worshipping in places that were originally places of serpent worship. The very roofs, go and look at the roofs alone. They're laid out, the tiles are laid out to look like snakeskin. Fantastic work, absolutely superb. All over Scandinavia, that kind of stuff is afoot. So you can find it everywhere. You know, once your eyes are opened, you'll be looking at your old Mayan things and saying, oh, there's a snake there. There's the old Mayan and Aztec god who pulls the snake through his tongue in order to release the blood into the holy bowl or grail below, which heals people, which turns into snakes on the other side of the world from where the grail actually was. So you'll find it everywhere. You'll find links to everything that we've been saying. It is a fascinating world of serpent worship, and it's one that's been hidden from us. And I believe today, in the 21st century, it's time that we actually had our real history back.
It would appear that if we open our eyes to it, we will begin to see more and more serpent imagery in the world around us. But the snake has a very different meaning to us now. If originally it was an animal that was revered, when and why did it become evil?
Well, a lot of people say to me, you know, you're pointing out that the serpent was involved in wisdom, which it was. Serpent wisdom is all part and parcel of this, because it's the gods that gave us the wisdom, according to ancient man. So of course it's going to be involved. But they also say to me, well, why was it turned into evil? Well, it didn't necessarily get turned into evil, other than it was in the first place anyway. What you'll find when you look around serpent worship is you'll find this duality. You'll find the good and the bad, and the life giver, which is why it's related to the sun in many ways, the life giver and the life taker. The sun snake, is often seen as the serpent because it gives us our life. Without the sun we'd die, but it also takes it because it measures the amount of years that we have. So it's the thing that takes it, gives it and takes it away. And the deities of the past were the ones who also did this. And so they had this duality to them. They gave us life and they took it away. So the serpent has both the good and the bad. So you've got the sun and the moon, showing the duality of the different sides of the energy. You've got here, this is the star. This will be like Draco, the pole star, right at the very top, which shows that we must be upright. And here's the fleur de lis, which shows royalty, which shows that you are of the divine. But it really started to get turned into something even worse around about 900 years before Christ, when the Jewish nation started to put it into the Bible and started to give it this element of badness, if you like, in Genesis, where it got turned. The original good serpent who was given us the wisdom from this great garden that we were, this utopic kind of place, they turned it into something bad. They created original sin from this snake and started to make it bad. And Christianity just came full force into that and really did, annihilate it. And that's around about 400, 500 years after Christ when they started to do that, especially after the Nicene Creed. They got together and they started to go around the world and replace every single pagan place, every single serpent worshipping place. And so you have St. Patrick, St. Paul, St. Michael, you know, going around, slaying the dragon, putting great big lances into these dragons in places. And there are many reasons for that and many symbols, many reasons for the symbol of the slaying of the dragon. But certainly one of them is that they overcame the serpent worshippers and started to turn it to something to evil. So the snake, the serpent and the dragon became the devil, became Satan. But even the early Gnostics knew this, and they said, we don't see it as Satan, we see it as Jesus, the Saviour.
So the once revered serpent, with all its duality, was crushed by the spread of Christianity, although its remains can still be found scattered across the world today. However, its influence can still be found long after its worship ended, and in places you wouldn't expect. Take the Holy Grail, for example.
One of the interesting things that serpent worship highlights is one of the greatest mysteries of the Western world. A thing that became incredibly popular recently with the Da Vinci Code, which was popularised way before, 20 years before that, with the Holy Blood, Holy Grail. And that, of course, is the Holy Grail, which is a great many things to a great many people. It's obviously, to a lot of people, to do with enlightenment, illumination, you know, finding that perfect place, that divine, which of course relates to a lot of what we've been talking about, finding that altered state. The serpent is all about wisdom. You know, the very word wisdom, Sophia, is taken from the serpent. Light of the serpent, it means, Ophia. So Philosophia is basically the love of the light of the serpent. So, you know, the old wisdom traditions are based in the philosophies and the love of wisdom of original serpent worship. So it would therefore maybe appear that the Grail itself, whatever it is also related to serpent worship. Now the Grail, of course, is supposed to be the thing that caught the blood from Christ. We've already seen that Christ, of course, was equated to the brazen serpent in the wilderness and is depicted as a snake held upon a tree. So this blood that came from the side of Christ is the blood of the serpent, and it was actually called that. It was supposedly collected into this holy relic, which became the Holy Grail. Or it's the cup that Christ used at the Last Supper. Now, one of the Last Suppers that the Gnostics used to have what was known as the Gnostic Eucharist, where they would have a special cup. And these are serpent worshippers, and this was a cup called the Cup of the Agatha Demon, which means good serpent. So even there, at the very earliest that we've got of the Eucharist, we have a cup of the serpent, the cup that caught the blood. Jesus is equated with the serpent. He slips his shroud off in the tomb, he comes up, he's resurrected, he's issued venom and blood on the venom and wine on the tree. You know, everything relates to this. So the Grail has to be something to do with the serpent. It has to be something to do with this spark of enlightenment too. Now, one of the really strong places where influence into Christianity came from was India, was the worship of the Nagas. And many people relate the Brahmin and the Druids and the Jewish priests all together, as if they're all the same. And these are all people that were involved in worship of the serpent. Anybody who tells me that the Jews didn't worship the serpent, well, they need to look at their own Bible, because you have in the temple, again and again and again, the Asherah poles, the columns or pillars of Asherah. She was a serpent goddess. And again and again they're told to take them down. So all the religions which fed into the story of the Grail have all got the serpent in there somehow, whether it be Judaism, Christianity or Hinduism. Now Hinduism, why do I say Hinduism? Well, the fact is that when the Romans were in England, at around the time that Arthur was supposed to have been King of England, and Arthur of course is the guy who's involved with the Grail, not forgetting that Arthur's second name was Pendragon. Now Pen means head, and dragon of course is the winged serpent. So he is basically the king, the head dragon. Arthur and Uther, his father, both terms which actually revert back to and mean Zeus, or the god, the one god. Zeus was born as a serpent. So Pendragon is the guy in charge. Now he's at a period when the Romans were here, and they brought with them certain fierce warriors, some of them known as Scythians, and they came from places like the steppes, and they brought with them certain traditions which have seeped into the Arthur legends. One of those is when they struck their victims and got blood on their sword, they would thrust it into the ground and pull it out again victorious. They would be king. So that's one of the traditions they bought. They also bought flags with great dragons on, because they were worshippers of the serpent, obviously. So you've got this dragon king gods coming and stamping ideas on England at that time. But these are also influenced by India and a lot of the Brahmin style stuff that was going off there. Now, one of the things that's really interesting is that there's tradition in India of a thing known as a tantric skull cup. And this is when you take the skull of a special holy man, somebody who'd become enlightened. You take that skull, you slice it, you turn it upside down, and you have a cup. And this was a special cup because you were drinking from the very place where this enlightenment and this infusion and this wisdom came from. It was symbolised with red and white infusions. Red and white is this venom and blood. We actually found that this is true, that they actually did used to mix venom and blood in the very skull. And you would get things like this. This is actually something that was used with the skull cup. This would actually go on the skull like this, and the head, basically the skull would rest on this very holy thing, and you would lift up and drink. And this shows the very elements. This symbol on top is actually fire. So this is the illumination. This is the Grail. It's illumination. It's a place where you used to mix all kinds of different things, whether it be left and right, duality, or whether it be venom and blood. There's more to the Grail than previously believed.
We'd expect to see the serpent in something as mystical and ancient as the Holy Grail. But how about a more modern literary reference?
One of the most unusual places that you'll find the serpent in modern texts, and certainly in modern folklore, if you like, is with a man called Ian Fleming, who wrote a series of novels about a famous spy, James Bond. Now, Ian Fleming got into alchemy, if you like, and the occult world from a very, very early age, because he was kind of screwed up, if you like. He was a very dualistic individual who had his dad had died when he was young, his mother was very overpowering, his elder brother was doing incredibly well, and he was having to struggle to keep up. So he was sent off to some special schools, one of which where in Austria, where he was with the Forbes Denises. And they were Adlerian psychoanalysts, and this is at a period where psychology and psychoanalysis was becoming the new rave. It was kind of a new science, and Jung was about, Carl Jung, and of course Sigmund Freud. But Ian Fleming went along to a lecture given by Carl Jung on a man called Paracelsus, the same man who, back in the old days, used to stare at nature and say that nature is the place that is the real Bible. This is the place where we'll get all our knowledge from. So he watched Carl Jung give a lecture on Paracelsus and got into, this deep stuff. Later on in his life, he goes on and goes through the Second World War, gets into secrets, and was actually in naval intelligence, and got involved in even the black ops, the occult ops against the Nazis. So he knew his stuff and was, even knowledgeable on Aleister Crowley. So he knew his stuff, and after the war he went on and wrote Casino Royale, and the rest is history. He went on and wrote many Bond novels. In those Bond novels there are alchemical references. This is what he did. He would put codes in there. He was using all his knowledge. And the snakes in there. You've got the Ouroboros Worm and Snake Company. You've got dragons coming across the marshlands, fire-breathing dragons from the underworld. You've got all these different things that are in there, but we also have them in his real life. Noel Coward, big friend of Ian Fleming's, actually went to stay at Goldeneye in Jamaica, which was the home of Ian Fleming, named by Ian Fleming, Goldeneye, very strange name to give something, a very Sufi name to give something. So Noel Coward went and stayed there. This was Ian Fleming's retreat. This was his place of perfection. But one thing struck out to Noel Coward. On the walls in the bedrooms were snakes. That's some indication. No phone, no electricity, no nothing else but snakes on the walls. And Noel Coward picked it up.
Ian Fleming surely isn't the only author to have serpent references in his works. But what about serpents in words themselves? Can etymology, the study of roots of English words, give even more of an insight into the adoration of the serpent? Even the word serpent...
One of the ways of really finding more, if anybody wants to go out there and actually do some research, is in a thing called etymology. And this is the science of language. And it's how we break words down and how words are created. Most words are made from letters, obviously. And those letters actually came from original symbols. Pictographs, pictoglyphs, hieroglyphs. This is where our letters come from. They all had original meaning. So you get the W, it's water. And you get the snake, and the Z is a very powerful letter too, which is obviously, it's related to the snake also. So the letters themselves come from original symbolic meanings. So there's power behind them, there's depth to them in that respect. But then when placed one after the other, they mean something also. So what you need to do in etymology is look for the words which mean snake, and you'll find them in other words. And some of the roots, they're called, the roots of the words for serpent, snake and dragon, are ob. Now that's a really interesting one for people to go and work out, because you'll start to look for obelisk. This is the pillar of the serpent, it's a powerful thing. Oph. OPH, which gives us Ophites, Ophiolatreia, Ophia for wisdom. Another one, Naga, which we've got in India, which went and changed into Snaga, Snaka, snake, Snake from the sun, the fire of the sun, turned into Hag and Haka. So we have places like Avebury, which is a place in the south of England where there were great big wonderful fantastic stone circle, which when seen from the sky actually looks like a snake on the ground. And in line with that is a hill called Hack Pen Hill. Now pen means head, as in Pendragon, and hack comes from the word haka, snacker, snake. So this is Snake's Head Hill, directly in line with where the snake's head is. So you can see it in the landscape and in the words. And Avebury itself may very well come from a root word for snake, heavier, Eve, Ave. So we have the very place is called the Snake. The Snake's Head Hill there, some people say to me, well, it's just named after the river. Where did the river get the name from? The river is like a snake. This is why we have rivers like the Serpentine. So the language opens the whole thing up. You look at the Kukulkan, which is a feathered serpent of South America. Kukulkan is the serpent bit. Canny means to be wise, to be really wise. And Can, of course, is the Scottish version of snake. It's the Canaanite version. Canaan, Can, serpent people. So, the language opens up such a lot. I always say to people, etymology is a treasure chest waiting for us to go and open. And anybody who's interested in this, go out there and start looking at roots of the word for serpent, and you'll find such a lot.
Even the word serpent itself has root meanings that associate it with knowledge, the sun, and power. It's little wonder, then, that it has been used to promote products in the last 100 years that claim to cure all manner of diseases. Baldness, lameness, blindness, rheumatism. We are, of course, talking about snake oil. But just where did snake oil originate?
Origin of snake oil is still pretty clouded. We do know that they got a lot of it from the Native American Indians. But there are elements of it that you can find in alchemy. From Europe, which kind of makes sense when you think that it was patented in Europe first. And there's a preparation, there's a very famous woodcut of an alchemist or a medical guy, nobody knows exactly, producing a thing called therialka. And he's got snakes on a table and he's chopping them up. And he's basically preparing this medicine. So there you have physical woodcut evidence from medieval Europe of preparation of snake oil medicine in preparation there. It's very cool. But to bring it to today, you know, we can go right back there and we can come to sort of, you know, the early 19th century with snake oil and 20th century even. But you can bring it today and you can go to places like Taiwan where you can still get snake infused in alcohol, snake infused in all kinds of different things, but the alcohol ones mostly of interest to most people. But people there claiming that it cures them of gout and all kinds of different things. Still being prepared, still snake oil is still available today and claimed by millions of people to be beneficial.
Snake oil treatments appear to have been prepared as far back as we can date the original woodcut, and it's still offered today in various forms throughout Asia. Why then does the term snake oil salesman still send a shiver down the spine?
Why the term snake oil salesman? Why is it derogatory today when originally it wasn't? Well, the origins of it, although people will popularly believe that it originated in America, it actually originated in England. So we believe, because that's where the first patent is created. And it actually got to such a fame that we were selling it to the British were selling it to the Americans. Unfortunately, we had a little argument with the Americans over something silly, like tea. And we kind of didn't talk to each other for a while, so the Americans took it on board wholeheartedly and created their own snake oil. So originally it was a good thing, people really liked it and claimed all kinds of cures for it, and evidence suggests that it actually worked. So what was in it? Well, there are a lot of snake oil, very famous ones, Nevada Ned, etc., different kind of names that they all came up with, like Barnum and Bailey, and they actually did do it at Barnum and Bailey's shows. They would actually get there and take the snakes, kill them, strip them, infuse them, make the medicine and sell it in front of everybody. And that's the circus element that it got to, and that's where it starts to be derided. And it also gets more derided later on when Prohibition comes in. The fact is that snake oil actually had elements of alcohol in it. And so when Prohibition came along, people bought snake oil, which by the time it had finished had no snake in it at all. It was more just alcohol. But originally it was much more of a homeopathic kind of medicine, where the concept with homeopathy is that you put a small element of something in but lots of water, and you keep infusing it down until eventually there is no trace element scientifically of the original substance. And that's how it got to, but weirdly it still seems to work. So that was snake oil. A lot of the people that were creating snake oil did claim that they got the knowledge of how to make it from the Native Americans, and there is real evidence for that. And today, you know, certain tribes still do it. Certainly in South America, that's still done today, and there are still some in North America that are looking at it. You know, they were even called the snake tribes. So I think there is originally some truth to snake oil. But it went downhill as these things often do when us in the West get hold of these things and start arguing about it and putting all kind of bans and things on. That it's interesting that there are different kinds of snake that we really have to think about here. There are the poisonous kind and there are non-poisonous kinds. It's the poisonous kinds which seem to be the most powerful for using for medicine. And they all split into different groups. You have certain kinds of venom. You have hemotoxic, which affect the blood, and you have neurotoxic, which affect your nervous system. They basically affect the nervous system, stop you being able to move, which is what the snake wants to keep you fresh. The hemotoxic will either be a coagulant, so it will make your blood coagulate, or an anticoagulant, so that the venom can go through your bloodstream a lot faster and maybe you'll bleed to death slowly. So really nice ways of going around things. But each one has got specific things in which have been found and tested by man over time to cure different kinds of things. So, you know, certain kinds of snakes maybe that have the coagulum, were used to stop warriors from bleeding to death. Others, where people had blood issues and it needed thinning, would use the anticoagulant venom. The neurotoxic snake venom was used for pain relief. So, it's like going to a pharmacy and picking your venom. and snake oil originated in that element of serpent worship, the actual physical use of it.
Alcohol plus snake plus prohibition gives the snake oil salesman a bad name. But would he have been derided when people found that snake oil wasn't the cure-all it was purported to be? Snake infusions are one form of administering the healing properties of the snake, but the venom itself is also alleged to have very beneficial uses.
Obviously, snake venom is not something to be played with. We shouldn't go around getting older snakes and trying to get some of that venom outside of it. And we shouldn't go around like the Christian snake handlers in America, dipping our hand into cages where there are snakes and hoping that the Lord saves us. The fact is that it's a very dangerous thing, and obviously there are levels of toxicity within venom. One way of getting around this today is the fact that we have an anti-venom. And we produce the anti-venom, for instance, by actually injecting that venom into big animals like horses. And we use the blood because basically the body overcomes that and creates a kind of way around it. And so we take that blood, we analyse it, and we create an anti-venom. Now that leads into a really interesting story about Alexander the Great. Now the story goes that he was sat with Plato one day having a meal, and there was a lady there, a really beautiful lady. Her skin was shiny and beautiful and pure white, etc. And Alexander the Great wanted her, basically. Thought she was absolutely gorgeous. And those around him, no, you can't touch her. And he's kind of, yes, I can, I'm Alexander the Great. No, you can't touch her. We mean you can't touch her. And it actually turned out that she was a very special lady from a healing fraternity, where she had actually been injected with snake venom her entire life. Small doses, regularly, but eventually making this lady totally venomous herself. You could not touch her because even her skin, the sweat from the pores of her skin were poisonous. You couldn't touch this lady. Now, is there any truth to this? I don't know. That's all we have on that. But we do have some kind of evidence today. There are men today that have taken themselves off, seen that there is more truth to this venom link than science is really investing in, and actually gone away and done a bit more work. Bill Hast is one of them, who, last time I saw a photograph of him, looked about 40, and yet he's about 80. And he's been injecting himself with snake venom for an awful long time. He's been bitten hundreds of times, and it doesn't affect him anymore. It's almost as if his entire body is toxic residue, but he's managed to survive, and it's all about moderation. We're a big being, we're not something small, we're not a rat. The idea is that the snake wants to kill something small. It's not about killing an elephant. So not many people actually die from snake attacks. It's not all down to the fact that we've got an anti-venom. It's down to the fact that we're a big being. It's not made to kill us. It's made to kill rats and birds and bats and small beings and rodents. So, it could be true that people were actually getting themselves bitten on purpose in order to create maybe an anti-venom or to actually be healers. There's a lot of scope for that. You look at Delphi in Greece, where the great healer, the seer there, was known as the Pythoness. These great seers, these great healers, are all about snakes. You look in Greek and Roman, here we go, Hygeia, where we get the word hygiene from. Hygiene is something we must have today, and we see this as being, and we clean everything, and we get obsessed by it. But Hygeia originally was a kind of deity of Greece. She was the daughter of Aesculapius, and who was a serpent god. She was a serpent goddess. Everywhere you see Hygeia, you see images of the snake. There's very famous images of Hygeia stood holding a bowl with a snake inside the bowl. Very Holy Grail style stuff, So the stories are there of healers like Aesculapius. You look at Aesculapius, or Hermes, and you have the rod of Aesculapius, or otherwise known as the rod of Hermes, and it's a single rod with a snake entwined around it. Very similar to the caduceus, where there are two snakes entwined with wings, feathered serpent yet again, and an orb on top, which is it's the sun, it's enlightenment, it's that perfect state that you get into when you're in balance, when you raise the energies in balance, the negative and the positive. It gives you wings and you are perfect. The caduceus is a fantastic symbol for that. So, venom, there's much more to it than just venom.
A snake bite a day might not keep the doctor away, but prudent application of its venom may prove very beneficial indeed, and has gained some ground with stroke victims. So the serpent is in our words, our religions, our medicines, and our minds. Where else can we find remnants of the serpent?
Well, where can we see evidence of serpent worship today? Quite easy, really, all over the place, but one of the first places that we should all look is up. Somebody said to me once, well, the worship of the serpent's all because it's in the sky. You look at Draco, it's a constellation in the sky, which is the only one that never moves, really. It goes around the pole consistently, where all the others change. No, that's not true. What's seen in the sky are stars, and of course some of the very earliest worship was Sabiism, was star adoration. But we painted the pictures in the sky. We placed the animals up there. We did that. We made Draco a dragon. We made Serpens caput, the serpent's head. We've done this. Ophiuchus, Aesculapius, they're all up there. We have placed images of our most important deities in the skies. And amazingly, the most important deity is Draco. It's the one that's smack there, that never moves, the one that we can measure by. There it is. It wasn't a goat, it wasn't a cow, it's a serpent. So we've placed that there, so all you have to do is look at your constellations, you'll find snakes. It's also one of the most important, interesting constellations, because there is one, Ophiuchus, the snake handler, where the snake is actually in two parts, and that's unusual. That's the only one that there is where the constellation is actually ripped apart by another constellation. The head and the tail of the snake, with Ophiuchus, the serpent handler, in between. So it's unusual too. It's not just really important in the right place. There's also another one that's unusual. So you can see it in the stars. They ain't never going to go away. You can look up there. Man can't erode them. So, you can't go and stamp those out. Other places you can find them, obviously we've discussed, you can look in the Bible. You can go and look at Genesis, and there is the only animal in the Bible which speaks using its own voice. It's the serpent. Most biblical scholars obviously will say, this isn't the only book that has this in, and this has been taken from other texts too, and that's true. It's been taken from Mesopotamian texts. So it's an indication of the fact that the serpent used to be worshipped, and he speaks to the female, doesn't speak to the male. And this is an indication of early, feminine aspect of all of this, that this is the mother goddess aspect who is giving the wisdom from the tree of knowledge. It's been demonized by later Judaism and Christianity, so that it's a bad serpent. But it's the only one in the Bible that speaks using its own voice. The only other animal in there that speaks is the ass, and that's God speaking out of... anyway, so it's in the Bible. It's in many other texts too. So you can still find it in many texts. You can pick up various Hindu texts. You can pick up any book on alchemy, and you will find a great many images there.
We've only scratched the surface of serpent worship and how it has had a profound effect on our history. So what would we find if we delved further?
Why did I get into serpent worship? I've often been asked this question. It's not a normal thing for people to do, to go around saying, I want to know all about why snakes were worshipped and etc. Well, I got into it because I was deeply interested in the mind of man and why he was religious and why he had the religious experience and the history of man. So you put all those things together, you can't take them apart, in my opinion. Religion and history and the mind, they're all hand in hand. They're all the main focus that I had. So years and years of looking at this and using the marketing brain that I had of sideways glancing these things too and saying there's some propaganda afoot, and noticing that certain elements of our history have been written out, I kind of got a little bit annoyed by that and started to see it everywhere. So when you start to strip that back, what you actually find beneath is this little snake. It's like pulling back the bark of a tree and there's the snake yet again. And everywhere I went, regardless of religion, even in the religion, there is the serpent. And that's what got me into it. This mind, this religious intent that man has focused history. And so what was the driving force? And what was the origin? And this is why it keeps you going, and you get this desire to want to know more, and you just go for it. And when you've finished, you sit back and you go, I am now firmly of the opinion. All the religions of the globe, all the real ancient religions of the globe, are all based on serpent worship. The religious experience is based around it. It's all there. It answers all the questions. And I think that's fascinating and exciting.
If we look for it, there is evidence to suggest that serpent worship may indeed have been the precursor to the ancient religions we follow today. Although a lot has been destroyed by man through the years, there are still artifacts, even in our language, that point to times when the serpent was revered. With the ability to heal others, to regenerate its skin, life-giver and life-taker, the serpent resembles many religious icons of our time. So was the serpent worshipped for its role in nature or for what it symbolized? And will the study of Ophiolatreia ultimately uncover the true origins of man?
The worship of the serpent is incredibly widespread. It's so widespread, it's ridiculous to say where, there is nowhere that it isn't, basically. We know this because of archaeology, it shows it. We've already pointed out it's in Africa, it's all over Africa, but it's certainly originated there, in my opinion, at least 70,000 years ago. I personally think it originated the very first time a man had a trip and went off into one of his altered states, because that's when he probably saw that waveform. But, you would say to yourself, well, places like Ireland, there aren't any snakes, so why did St. Patrick go to Ireland and kick off all the snakes? There aren't any. Well, that's evidence for the fact that St. Patrick went to Ireland and kicked out the serpent worshippers who had spread there. All across England and Northern Europe, we had people known as Druids. Now, people look at Druids and see them in their white clothes with their staff, looking a bit like Gandalf. The fact is that they were known as Gonadas, now adders. And we all know, there's a snake called an adder. They were known as the serpent priests. They were guys who understood this serpent wisdom. You go to South America, you go to cultures such as the Aztec, or the Mayan, Olmec, Toltec, you want to name it, the snake is there all the time. One of their great gods, Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan. It's the serpent, feathered serpent. And he's the great god. He's also the saviour god. He's the bearded saviour god who is seen with outstretched arms in crucified form on the other side of the planet. And this upset the Christians when they first went there, of course, but it's there, it's still there. This is the saviour god who is the serpent, and the feathers, basically the bird aspect of this is the serpent gives you wings. It basically enlightens you, frees you. That's the whole concept of this. But it's not the whole concept. There are other concepts too. There is the light and the dark to serpent worship. You cannot pinpoint one particular thing, one particular this serpent god there. There are many serpent gods because there are many faces to man. And they're all aspects of ourselves. The serpent is simply the symbol used. So you've got them there in South America, you've got them in North America. We still have traditions today. We still have North American Indians, native Indians, who still use the serpent, still look to the serpent with reverence, still use it for healing. And it's there in their traditions. You look to Scandinavia, you look to the Norse. The Norse, of course, according to certain researchers, got their beliefs directly from Mesopotamia, that these were peoples who spread from Mesopotamia, where we have the Gilgamesh epic and all kinds of different things which involve the power of the great serpents, Tiamat and various others, Anat, going up through Europe, past the Danube, up into the Scandinavia and creating places like Gotland, Godlands, where suddenly we find dragons and serpents depicted everywhere. From the earliest times there is rock art of the ships where the gods came upon with serpents on. They actually brought the snakes with them, or the serpent worship.